Let's jump right in. Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to try and completely shatter our romanticized illusions of history today. Let's strip away that polished, shiny veneer we usually see and get straight down to the raw, completely unfiltered truth of the past.
So I want you to ask yourself a seriously honest question. Do you think you'd actually survive historical times? It's really easy to sit in our comfortable, modern lives and imagine this sort of Hollywood view of history, right? We picture ourselves in towering stone castles, watching gallant swordsmen, or maybe we envision passive, helpless princesses just waiting to be rescued in these pristine ancient ruins. But the actual truth? Yeah, you probably wouldn't last a single day.
The contrast between fantasy and reality is honestly staggering. On one side, we've got Hollywood history, chivalry, passive royalty, anonymous women. But on the flip side, we have the grim reality. We're talking disease, calculated ruthlessness, and silent cosmic power. So we're going to journey through three vastly different, entirely unfiltered historical eras to see how raw human endurance, not fairy tales, actually shaped our world.
Okay, Section 1, the Medieval Reality Check. Surviving the year 1325. Let's plunge straight into 14th century Europe. Imagine this. You've just woken up in the year 1325. You open your eyes in a freezing wooden hut with a charming, open-concept dirt floor that you are sharing with your entire family, a random cousin, and your livestock. Your bed? It's a flea-infested straw mattress that smells exactly like a barn floor. And the aroma of your lovely home is a fragrant symphony of stale beer, human sweat, and dung. So it's 6 a.m., and you're drinking weak beer. Sounds like a party, right? Well, actually, it's because the water from the local stream is teeming with parasites, and just one sip could literally murder you quietly. By sunrise, you are out in the freezing dampness, wearing your one scratchy wool tunic, starting some backbreaking field labor. By noon, your meal is a wooden bowl of pottage. It's basically this thick, gloopy stew that's been simmering for weeks, with new mystery ingredients just dumped on top, paired with bread so rock hard you practically have to negotiate with it. Finally, sunset rolls around and you return to your windowless, smoke-filled hut to sleep and do the whole shebang all over again.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens when you actually get sick. Because medieval medicine was essentially polite torture with a theology degree. Got a toothache? Your barber, yep, the same guy cutting your hair, would just pull your tooth out by candlelight using iron pliers. Oh, and zero anesthetic. Without antibiotics, that simple toothache often led to a deadly fever. Feeling anxious? They thought that was an excess of black bile, so prepare for laxatives or bloodletting with leeches. And if you're really sick, doctors usually blamed bad air or sinful thoughts. At that point, the primary treatment pretty quickly shifted to just having a priest at your bedside giving you your last rites.
Which brings us to this absolutely crushing statistic: 50%. Nearly half of all children died before reaching age 5. Half. From disease, malnutrition, or literally just one bad winter. If you somehow survived to 40, you were practically a celebrity, often just referred to as the old one. Life back then was a brutal, slow-motion endurance test, with an average life expectancy of just 30 to 40 years.
All right, moving on to Section 2, Catherine the Great's ambition and the passive princess myth. We are pivoting from the peasant mud to the glittering yet equally dangerous 18th century Russian palaces. Forget that whole passive princess myth. I want to introduce you to Sophie. She was a foreign German teenager who arrived in freezing St. Petersburg at just 14 years old, basically serving as a political pawn for her ambitious parents. But beneath her polite, diplomatic smile, she was rapidly transforming into the mastermind who would eventually become Catherine the Great.
Because she didn't just inherit power, she took it. While her husband, Tsar Peter III, was off playing with toy soldiers and alienating the Russian military and church, Catherine was quietly observing. It was an absolute masterclass in a bloodless coup. Step 1, she cultivated allies among scholars and military officers in the shadows. Step 2, she patiently waited for Tsar Peter's erratic blunders to turn the court completely against him. And Step 3, in 1762, while Peter was out of town, she seized the allegiance of the Imperial Guard. Boom. Through pure patience and wit, a foreign-born woman seized the Russian throne without fighting a single battle.
But as you can imagine, ruling Russia was an incredibly precarious balancing act. In public, she played the philosopher queen. She championed Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire, introduced smallpox vaccines, built schools. But Russia's reality forced her hand. To appease the wealthy nobles who kept her in power, she actually expanded crushing serfdom. And when a peasant named Pugachev led a massive rebellion promising freedom, she didn't exactly use her Enlightenment ideals. Nope, she used professional armies to ruthlessly crush it.
She had to prioritize absolute stability and survival over her own progressive theories.
And her ambition was definitely geographic. 200,000. That is the massive number of square miles of territory she added to the Russian Empire. To put that into perspective, that's like adding the entire size of Spain. She swallowed Crimea, parts of Poland, and stretches of the Black Sea coast. She didn't just rule Russia, she actively and aggressively remade its borders, proving for sure that female rulers could be just as calculated, imperial, and ruthlessly effective as any king.
Now for Section 3, Mystery of the Red Queen and the Silent Consort Myth. Our next stop takes us deep into the humid Chiapas jungle of southern Mexico to the 7th century Maya civilization. In 1994, archaeologists made an astonishing discovery in Palenque. They found a hidden, pristine, completely sealed crypt inside Temple 13. And what they found inside, it totally shatters the myth of the silent, passive, ancient consort.
When they opened the stone sarcophagus, this brilliant red dust actually rose into the air, and this brilliantly illustrates the sheer spiritual magnitude of this burial. This dust was cinnabar, a highly toxic mercury sulfide. You see, for the ancient Maya, this wasn't just a pretty color. It was a sacred substance symbolizing blood, rebirth, and the life force connecting the human and divine realms. Covering her body in this lethal red powder marked her as an incredibly powerful divine figure who was being carefully prepared to cross into the dangerous Maya underworld known as Xibalba.
It's so fascinating to look at the artifacts they found beside her crimson-drenched bones. Because we have to remember, these weren't mere luxuries. They were absolutely essential spiritual tools. There was an exquisite jade funerary mask to preserve her identity for the gods. Heavy jade necklaces and ear spools symbolizing eternal life and divine favor. She even had bone needles and obsidian blades, which hints at powerful ritual bloodletting that she either performed in life or was going to need in death. And they found sealed ceramic vessels, placed there to provide sustenance for her treacherous journey through the cosmic layers.
What makes this whole discovery even more fascinating is exactly where she was found, right next door to the grand tomb of Pakal the Great, who is Palenque's most famous king. The Maya believed deeply in cosmic duality, so if Pakal represented the masculine sun journeying through the underworld, the Red Queen, who was buried with equal reverence in the adjacent temple, likely represented the feminine moon. This perfectly establishes the Maya concept of relational rulership. Ancient royal women definitely weren't just background characters. They wielded immense political and spiritual influence right beside their kings.
Because her sarcophagus completely lacked any identifying glyphs, we actually still don't know her real name for sure, though some think she might have been Zakbu Ajau. But, as one historian beautifully put it, she remains nameless but not voiceless. Her rich, sacred burial single-handedly rewrites our entire understanding of female power in ancient history. Even without a single inscribed glyph, she proves that power flowed through mothers, queens, and priestesses who literally held the very dynasties together.
Let's move to Section 4, Unfiltered Historical Realities and the Modern Myth, and see how this builds into the 20th century. We've seen how historical reality is forcefully shaped by collective endurance, but this isn't just a thing of the ancient past. We see this exact same defiance in modern times, where the individual forcefully shapes their own reality instead of fitting into a fairy tale.
Which brings us to the iconic Mexican artist Frida Kahlo. When European surrealists tried to claim her as one of their own, basically painting her as this passive dreamer, she completely rejected the myth. She explicitly stated, "I never painted dreams, I painted my own reality." Frida forged a massive global identity out of excruciating physical trauma. She simply refused to hide the messy, raw ugliness of her suffering.
When you really look at her life, the sheer physical endurance is just staggering. Back in 1925, at just 18 years old, she survived a devastating bus crash where an iron handrail literally impaled her. Over her lifetime, she endured over 30 grueling surgeries. When she was completely immobilized in full body casts, she didn't give up. Instead, she had a mirror rigged to her bed and just began painting her own fractured body. And in 1953, when her health was so fragile, doctors told her she couldn't attend her first solo exhibition in Mexico, she defied everyone by arriving in an ambulance and being carried in on a stretcher. Her modern defiance perfectly mirrors the gritty, stubborn survival that defines the peasants, empresses, and queens of our past. So, we arrive at our final thought. History is not a fairy tale of pristine castles and effortless power. It's a story of grit, of toxic cinnabar, of freezing hovels, and of bodies broken and rebuilt. When you slide into a clean bed tonight, With the luxury of indoor plumbing, central heating, and modern medicine, will you appreciate the raw, unfiltered endurance of the ancestors who built our world? Because they fought through famine, disease, and ruthless politics so that we wouldn't have to. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it leaves you with a profound new appreciation for the real, gritty story of human survival.